What starts with tariffs often ends with troops. The US-China trade dispute isn't just about cheap goods and manufacturing jobs. It's potentially the opening chapter of Cold War 2.0. And if history has taught us anything, it's that Cold Wars can turn hot. In fact, some of America's most defining conflicts began exactly this way. Your grocery bills, medication costs, and retirement savings could all be casualties of this brewing storm. Today, I'm breaking down how trade wars become real wars and what everyday Americans need to know to prepare. Hey everyone, my name's Kevin and welcome back to the channel. I post new analysis that could help you make better decisions for your health and finances in these uncertain times. Today, we're talking about something that affects every single American: the escalating trade tensions with China and why history suggests that we should be paying very close attention. If you've noticed prices climbing at the store or medications becoming harder to find, this might be why. Let's break down what's happening right now between the US and China. The current US-China relationship is marked by escalating tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars in goods, restrictions on technology exports and imports, competition for global influence, especially in developing nations, military posturing in the South China Sea and around Taiwan, accusations of currency manipulation, and intellectual property theft. This isn't just political theater, it's a textbook definition of a Cold War, a state of geopolitical tensions between powers that stopped short of direct military conflict. The original Cold War with the Soviet Union lasted decades and shaped every aspect of American life. We're potentially seeing the emergence of Cold War 2.0, with similar patterns emerging. History is filled with examples of economic tensions that escalated into full-scale conflict. Let's look at three critical examples. First, the American Revolution. Many Americans don't realize the Revolutionary War started primarily as a trade dispute. British taxes and trade restrictions like the Tea Act, the Sugar Act, and Stamp Act were economic policies that progressively angered colonists. No taxation without representation wasn't just a catchy slogan. It was a response to trade policies that many Americans felt were unfair. What began as economic grievances escalated to the Boston Tea Party and eventually full-scale war by 1775. Second, the American Civil War. While slavery was the moral center of the conflict, trade disputes between the industrial North and agricultural South created differences and economic tensions. The North pushed for protective tariffs to shield its growing industries, while Southern states depended on exporting cotton and importing manufacturing goods suffered under these policies. These economic frictions helped push the nation toward its bloodiest conflict. Third, World War II. In the Pacific, before Pearl Harbor, the U.S. imposed increasingly strict trade embargoes on Japan, including oil restrictions that threatened to strangle their economy and military. Japan's subsequent attack wasn't random. It was a direct response to economic pressure that they felt left them no alternative. The pattern is clear. Trade disputes create economic hardships. Economic hardships breeds resentment. Resentment feeds nationalism. And nationalism can justify military action. Now, let's focus on what might be the most dangerous flashpoint in this emerging Cold War: Taiwan. What's so important about Taiwan? Well, it just sits 100 miles off China's coast, but its significance extends far beyond geography. To understand why Taiwan could be the spark that turns this Cold War hot, we need to understand three crucial factors: historical claims, strategic importance, and technological dominance. First, the historical context. Follow the Chinese Civil War in 1949. The defeated nationalist government retreated to Taiwan, establishing a separate government while mainland China fell under communist control. Ever since, Beijing has maintained that Taiwan is a breakaway province that must eventually be reunified with the mainland, by force if necessary. They call this the One China policy. Now, the United States has maintained a deliberately ambiguous position, acknowledging Beijing's position without fully endorsing it, while simultaneously providing Taiwan with defensive weapons and security guarantees. This strategic ambiguity has maintained a fragile peace for decades, but tensions are escalating rapidly. Second, strategic control. Taiwan sits at a critical juncture in what military strategists call the first island chain. You see, it's a series of islands from Japan through Taiwan to the Philippines that effectively contain China's naval power, along the other disputed territories in the South China Sea, control of Taiwan would give China the ability to project military power throughout the Pacific and threaten key shipping lanes that carry trillions in global trade. China has been systematically building military installations on disputed islands and reefs throughout the region, creating what amounts to unsinkable aircraft carriers. Military analysts see this as preparation for potentially retaking Taiwan by force and establishing dominance throughout the Western Pacific. Third, and perhaps most critical for everyday Americans, Taiwan produces roughly 60% of the world's semiconductors and over 90% of the most advanced chips. One Taiwanese company, Taiwan Semiconductor, manufactures the chips that power everything from your smartphone to military equipment. It's not an exaggeration to say that Taiwan is the world's most important technological real estate. A Chinese takeover of Taiwan would give Beijing near monopoly control over the world's most essential technology supply chain. Imagine the leverage this would create, not just economically, but militarily. This technological dominance is why many analysts believe Taiwan represents a red line in the sand that could trigger direct military confrontation between the US and China. Beyond Taiwan, the broader US-China relationship shows alarming parallels to previous conflicts, like Britain in the 1770s. Both the US and China are implementing tariffs and trade restrictions that affect core industries, like the North-South divide. We have fundamentally different economic models clashing, and like pre-World War II tensions with Japan, technology restrictions and resource competition are creating existential economic threats. We're seeing the same warning signs: increasingly hostile rhetoric from both governments, growing nationalist sentiment in both countries, military buildup in potential flashpoint areas, competition for allies and influence globally, decreased diplomatic communication. The difference? Today's superpowers have something called nuclear weapons, making the stakes exponentially higher than any previous conflict. So what does this mean for you and your family? The effects are already being felt. First, rising prices. China supplies approximately 20% of all U.S. imports. When tariffs increase, so do your costs for things like electronics and appliances, clothing, textiles, furniture, medications, and medical supplies, and building materials. Second, medication shortages. Nearly 80% of active pharmaceutical ingredients in U.S. medications come from China and India. Trade disruptions have already led to shortages of common medications for diabetes, heart conditions, and other chronic illnesses. Third, economic instability. Your retirement accounts and investments are vulnerable to market volatility caused by trade tensions. During previous trade escalations, we've seen stock market drops of 5 to 10% in just days. Fourth, supply chain disruptions. From car parts to home goods, many products we rely on daily could become unavailable or significantly delayed. But knowledge is power, and there are steps you can take to protect yourself and your family. Consider diversifying your investments away from companies heavily dependent on U.S.-China trade. Building an emergency fund to weather potential economic volatility. Discussing long-term medication plans with your doctor, including alternatives if your current prescriptions become unavailable. Supporting local businesses and American manufacturing when possible. Staying informed through multiple news sources to cut through political spin. These aren't panic measures. They're prudent precautions based on historical patterns. Throughout history, economic conflicts have been the canaries in the coal mine for larger confrontations. The current U.S.-China trade tensions follow concerning historical patterns that have previously led to hot wars. By understanding these patterns, we can better prepare ourselves and advocate for de-escalation before history repeats itself. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Have you noticed prices increasing in your area? Are you concerned about medication availability? Drop a comment below and let's discuss how we can navigate these uncertain times together. If you found this analysis helpful, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Subscribe for weekly updates on how global events affect your health and finances. Thanks for watching, and remember, understanding history doesn't just make us smarter, it helps us prepare for the future. I'll catch you on the next one.